Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Frontier Communication Studio. I am Avast. That we're not supposed to do the intro here, but I'm just starting the intro here because we're technically supposed to throw it to the bumper. But let's throw it to the bumper and then do the intro. Let's do that. Really good intro from myself. I am Avast here at the Frontier Communication Studio in Dallas, Texas. We really started off really strong. Hope everyone's doing well. It's just myself and Mike, the technical producer. He's off to the side. You can't see him.
Hi.
But he's here. You can hear him. So we're already starting off great without Jane. Jane sometimes corrals us at points when I'm bouncing off the walls. But we have the wrap-up episode of Contested today. Season's done. We saw the grand finals. We saw the champions have been crowned. If you don't know at this point, well, then too bad. Okay? At this point, you should know. You should know who's won the grand finals of the Overwatch League at this point. The grand finals winner was the San Francisco Shock. The San Francisco Shock, in a first of the finally. After 3 years, we've had a good grand finals. Each year so far, it has been a stomp with Shock. The last year, stomping the Titans. And Shock win versus Seoul Dynasty in the 4-2. They're looking incredible, looking as dominant as ever. The MVP, I mean, they're just looking this, arguably everyone's saying this is the best team in Overwatch that we've ever seen. This is the best team we have ever seen in Overwatch, the San Francisco Shock. Now, 2 years in a row, 2 very dominant years. This year, not quite as dominant as last, but we have the footage of them winning. It was a very wholesome moment. There was a lot of things overcome for the squad too. Apparently, Ons has had a lot of medical problems. He had to deal with issues being away from home. But granted, Shock also did not winning the grand finals, did not win any other map types other than Control and Hybrid. They didn't win Assault. Their Hanamura record was broken during the grand finals, but Assault Dynasty. And I feel like we have to have a discussion wholly as just as a recap here, a part of the grand finals and the winning and everything like that, is that I am super happy with how this grand finals went down. And Shock, it's great Shock one another because, Super's my guy. I have to maintain sort of a professional relationship and be I can't root for Shock overtly. But, Super and I were ex-teammates. He's my dude. I'm super, super happy that not only did he win, but he also got to be a key player. I mean, Shock doesn't win grand finals without Super because they didn't have a Hog player, someone that could play, that they didn't have a player that could play Hog and also play the other off-tank role at the same time because Troy can only be one person at once on one keyboard at once. So I think it's huge for Shock, and I'm really happy for Super. I'm happy for the whole squad. I think considering the beginning, some of them, I mean, Krusty and Striker were also, coach and teammates of mine on Boston. And now have gone on to win the league twice. It was insane. And also not just winning the league twice, but it wasn't close. It was, the grand finals were good, but it realistically wasn't down to necessarily the wire. And on top of that, their regular season and their playoff runs and stuff were not that close. They were just an extremely dominant team throughout the past 2 years. So I am very, very happy with how that went down. I think everyone should be happy with how the year went down and having our best grand finals yet. If you're a Shock fan, you're probably just insufferable right now, as all Shock fans might be. It's like Fusion fans, but your ego's deserved, unlike Fusion fans. And if you're a Dynasty fan, good for you, because you sort of were a better Washington Justice, where you were kind of mediocre, actually not quite as bad as Justice all year. Not quite as bad as Justice all year, but definitely a mediocre in the APAC region, and then had a great meta shift at the end. So good work, Dynasty fans. You've had your best year yet after getting really lucky. But you have to give them props because I think the Dynasty was a great team this year. They were able to put Gesture onto a tank that he can frag. It shows the power. Sometimes we forget main tank players are really good players in their own rights. So I do think that it's really impressive. And I think it's very important as well for how good the duo is of Prophet and Gesture to talk about the legacy they made, because after 3 years of Overwatch League, we have 3 years of data, right? So we can definitely talk about Shock being the best team in Overwatch, which I think is kind of an undisputed fact at this point. Who knows, 10 years, 20 years down the line, if Overwatch is still running Overwatch League, then we can maybe crown a new champion. But currently in the, I guess now at this point, 4-year history of Overwatch, technically 5 if you count if we go to ZP and go to the way back and go to the boomer times of Overwatch and be I'm back in the Ghost Shoe Gamer weeklies. We used to wear an onion on our belt, as was the tradition, and we would play Overwatch, and Zenyatta had 100 HP. But I do think that now Shock is the undisputed best team in Overwatch for sure, 100%. Krusty is definitely the best coach in Overwatch League, in Overwatch, 100%. And the Shock core, every portion of it is insane. I mean, not even just the Shock core. There were players that weren't playing that were so good. Rascal, obviously, for example, Smurf, who didn't play full time because they needed to have the off-tank capabilities with Super. So it's just the best team Overwatch has ever seen. And I think we're still, if you're a Seoul fan, you can be really happy because even though you got really lucky with the meta, it showed that, importantly, I think people should stop underrating Fitz, who I think has always been an underrated candidate. Toby has continually consumed every support that tried to bench him. Creative, a rookie in the league, actually had an insane performance on Ana. Gesture and Profit still showing their relevancy. And Marv 1, of course, continuing the Seoul tradition of not playing, we don't need off-tank players. And maybe a little bit of a redemption arc for the Dynasty management and Dynasty coaches a little bit. So I think for fans of both of these squads, you should walk away happy, knowing that there's hope, and knowing that, in particular, that the talent on both of those teams is really, really good. And they just need, for Dynasty in particular, I think they're going to need a lot of refinement going into the offseason. And the roster mania has actually sort of started a little bit, but not for Dynasty yet. Not sort of a shock, but not really for Dynasty. And so they have good pieces to build around and to make with. And Shock are perfect as they are. I wouldn't change Shock at all. I would leave Shock untouched if possible, but who knows if it's going to be possible because they're just so well-rounded. They're just so well-rounded. So I think if you are a fan of those teams, though, overall, I was really happy. Apparently, also, I mean, we had an article. Apparently, the Grand Finals viewership was insane. There was a report that came out from the Esports Observer as well, and that the Grand Finals global viewership has increased nearly 40% year over year, with China having a 260% increase in viewership. Now, I'm going to say this, the caveat this, though. Because I, as someone that loves Overwatch and grows up in Overwatch and been in Overwatch, it's got my start like really professionally in Overwatch. I think this is great because I think kind of the doom and gloom around the league is it's not unfounded, but I feel like all things considered, considering the peak viewership in North America on YouTube, and like Western viewership was 180,000 across all platforms on YouTube after a fresh swap with no drops. That's honestly not that bad for Overwatch League. Considering when it was a fresh platform swap with no drops, 180,000 with peak Western viewership, I'm actually like, okay, like, that's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not good, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. But that being said, this Chinese viewership, who actually knows how many people this might be? Because people are saying, oh, Blizzard have these numbers directly, just like Riot gets their numbers directly for China about the LPL or the World's Finals. But we have legitimately no way of knowing. And you could make the argument of like, well, Blizzard would never lie about the viewership because that's fraud. That would be fraud to the advertisers. But the thing about esports is that it's not fraud. It's creative interpretation. That's just on the edge of fraud, but not quite. So who knows really how accurate it is. But based off an official report, it's actually pretty good. And also on top of that, we do have to take into account that APAC, it was now an APAC time zone, so it was a lot more viewer-friendly for the APAC region in particular, for Korea and China and the rest of APAC. On top of that, it was better for European viewers. It was obviously worse for North American viewers as someone that was up for like 10 hours, getting 2 hours of sleep a night for about 2 days in a row, and was delirious. Very delirious. It was definitely worse for North American viewers, but all things considered, the platform and the angle and the fresh swap and everything, realistically, there is some optimism to be found there, but that doesn't mean that everything's peachy and rosy. I do think there's a lot of changes to be made still, but realistically, a lot of them aren't even necessarily based off the league. It's like just the base game. The base game just needs to be like, we're gonna go a whole other rant here. Actually, I'm gonna do it. The base game needs just some content because who knows when Overwatch 2 is coming? It might be. We're hoping next year. Who knows? But in this day and age, we can't have 1994 game development in the 2020 era of multiplayer esport platforms. And Blizzard are sort of like, hey, can't wait to release Diablo 2. You guys ready for the new expansion? You guys ready for the new expansion when Overwatch is sort of competing with live service games that are having constant content updates, especially if you want a multiplayer shooter. So I'm hoping there will be some bigger changes. I'm hoping because a lot of my big problems, because I think the game's in a great state balance-wise currently. Also, can we bring up the patch too? They released a patch. They released a patch today, and essentially nothing was done except their legs patch is happening. They've changed the recoil. They've reduced some of the damage. In addition to that, they also, what was the other change? They also removed the spread and increased the ammo. So, and on top of that, they changed the filter options for party. So, and I was discussing with Mike, the producer, earlier, but I felt like this is an odd one because, like, we're just giving you the option to see bad words, which to me just opens up liability to a game developer. But I understand why they've added it as a quality of life feature, because some people are like, if you're in a party, since you have separate options for match chat and team chat and party chat, like, it's cool. But I always thought, I was like, why would you ever have an unfiltered option ever in an online game? That's kind of crazy to me. But they added that. And then they didn't really do much. They also added the elevator changes, which, so if you're an elevator fan, Mangachu screeching. But so now if you don't, it doesn't actually move until a player gets on it and it stays at the top for a little bit. So it's less RNG, but like, why not just add jump pads still? Please just add jump pads. Just add the jump pads. Do away with the elevators. We don't need them. If we had elevators, if we had the ability to put jump pads in real life, in this building, I would use jump pads in a heartbeat. I would never use an elevator. Elevators are terrifying to me. It's a metal box of death. And so and that's mostly because I was trapped in an elevator as a kid. So like, I just don't like elevators. But the purpose there is like, just put the jump pads in, okay? Just put the jump pads in. And then they've had some hero updates. Reinhardt added a voice line, cool. This is the only actual update is Soldier 76, which is, you know, ammo increased, bullet damage was decreased by 1. A constant recoil versus a random recoil is added, so you can actually control it. We Valve, boys. We Valve now. CSGO, Valorant, we got constant recoil, and the bullet spread was removed. So there's hypotheses that Soldier might be coming back. But it still seems unlikely because he still has a lot of the same problems, which is he's not burst damage, and burst damage is the most valuable damage in Overwatch. Mobility is good, flanking is good, sustainability is good, but burst damage, and also he has the worst ult, one of the worst ults in the game, if not the worst. So nothing really much. Everything else is kind of just quality of life improvements for Sombra, for Widow, bug fixes. So not a huge patch, but it just leads me into my bigger point of the game needs content. More so, everyone puts like, oh, the league's doing this wrong. The platform's wrong. League of Legends does fine on YouTube. League of Legends has biggest year ever on YouTube. Other game, Call of Duty League, peaked at what, like 330K, 340, something like that, on YouTube. So, and obviously our year-over-year viewership is better for APAC, which is great, but also for our Western audiences in general, just in general audiences too, because we just need more content. So I'm hoping Overwatch 2 is going to change that, because my current gripes of the game are not even on a balanced state. It's not in a league doing anything terribly wrong. It's realistically, the game is just completely stagnant. And we're waiting on a 1995 game developer schedule for a live service multiplayer game that is just not going to compete with other things that are in those similar models like Valorant and League that just put out so much content. So give us content, Blizzard. Inject in my veins. But that's the rant for the beginning, and also is just sort of our recap of who won the grand finals with Shock. So, and everyone's on a break, obviously, for those teams right now. We're heading to roster mania season, off-season, because the timeline has been established. John Spector made a comment, but they also published the timeline. And it was on October 12th that teams had to I think we have a picture of that, don't we? Of all the timeline of them. Maybe not. But either way, they published a timeline, but now teams can start trading players. They could start either releasing players, choosing not to pick up their player options, or accepting the player options. So, and then starting on October 24th, you can start signing free agents. Teams can actually start signing free agents. And there's already been a little bit of roster mania after post-grand finals. I mean, we had Boombox saying that they are going to be a free agent. Their contract expired. It hasn't been picked up yet. And remember, for this, if you are a free agent, it doesn't necessarily mean you aren't going back to your team. It just means the team has either decided not to take your player option, or your current contract has expired and they haven't renegotiated yet. So free agency doesn't always mean cut. Doesn't always mean not coming back. It just means that they are currently a free agent. So we had Boombox. We had a lot of Gladiators departures, obviously. We talked about Halo from Boston. Moth made a tweet, which was since deleted, because technically the deadline wasn't reached yet for them to not extend his player option if there was one, and for him not to technically be a free agent yet. So he had to go then delete that afterwards. But Moth is also a free agent. And he's just looking for different options. It doesn't mean he's not coming back to Shock. Glad's obviously released Cloudy. They've released Big Goose and Shaz and Bishu. Cloudy had actually a sort of not a meltdown, but it was an insight into what it's sort of like to be a permabench player, and it's someone that resonates with me as someone that was in that situation. Yeah, we can go ahead and play it.
I play 10 hours a day. I don't get paid, and then I get thrown into the dumpster, but then I get thrown into the trash, and then I continue. Such is life.
And then he swiftly afterwards, he issued an apology. But to be fair, like, I understand why an apology was issued, but like, this should come as no surprise. Like, the sentiments expressed by Cloudy is a sentiment that any competitive player will feel after being permabenched, where it's like not even necessarily your fault. It could be the metas. Well, technically, I guess the meta not being in your favor is your fault because your hero pool should be better. But let's say, for example, the meta's not in your favor. Maybe they just started working with a player earlier than you because you weren't signed in time, and they said, okay, we're going to stick with this person for consistency's sake, you know, or just you have a bad scrim block 1 month and they say, well, we just don't have time to work with you anymore, which is a legitimate problem because the reality of the Overwatch League teams is that there's just not enough resources to go around for all the players. There aren't. Not currently. We're not the NFL, as much as Nate and Andrew used to say that in season 1. It's going to be bigger than the NFL. But we don't have the level of resources required and the level of physical fatigue required to have a constantly rotating roster of players as much. So it's a really feels bad man situation for a permabench player because it pretty much they've stated ahead of time, you are not going to play. You are done. And Cloudy was 100% in that scenario where Cloudy was not going to play. The meta was not in his favor. They had been working with OG. There was just no way it was going to happen unless something crazy happened. So that sentiment is kind of like the insight into how every permabench player feels. Unless they're a player that really just doesn't want to play anymore. You know, they're just done. They're ready to move on. They're ready to go to management. Like, they're just coasting in that last year, which can happen, admittedly. But most players, when they're permabench, they feel frustrated. They feel just totally like, my career is being ruined. There's nothing I can do. And, you know, as someone that was in that situation and then had to pivot swiftly because it was like, well, my career is done as a player. No one's going to want to work with me anymore. It is really, really unfortunate because it feels like you have no control of your destiny at all while still believing in yourself and working hard. So it is unlucky, but rosters have been swapping. I think by far the biggest one, because for Gladiators, they haven't actually removed any starters other than the support line, and people were suspecting changes anyways. So none of the moves really, by far the most surprising move, and same thing with Boombox. Boombox was not going to play Overlarm, it's just a fact. The most surprising move was Moss saying they're going to be a free agent because you would expect all the Shock roster to be re-signed, not because they just won another ring, but because Andy Miller himself said on Twitter, the core was re-signed. Well, who's the core if not Moth? If not the nervous Marbles player? Why? What is the core? If not Moth then? Because you don't have another main support on the roster. So it is a really interesting idea to say like, well, Andy Miller said the core is re-signed, but somehow Moth is going free agent, right? Core in his belief. That's true. It could be Core in Andy Miller's belief. But in my view, if you are the only main support on a roster and you've been on that roster both the years they've won a championship and have been instrumental, the Shock 100% are as good as they are because of Moth. Sure, are there other really good main supports you could probably slot in for Moth and you'd win? Probably. Would they fit the team culture as well? Would they be as consistent? I don't know. Would they be as good as leaders? Everyone says that Moth's leadership is like imperative to the team. So there's a great question to be asked of like, if Moth is not core, what is core for the Shock? What is core then in that case? So that's by far the biggest bombshell I'd say of the offseason, because Halo's expected. Terrible season for Boston. Halo went from being a pretty good player in contenders. People said that he was a scrim partner for Shock at points when he was in contenders and when he was on the NRG squad. To that is unlucky, but he did get to play still. He probably still has a future ahead of him. Potentially, it just depends what happens in the next year. Core is the slot in the league. So yeah, we'll just have to see what happens with the Shock core. But roster mania is beginning. I think this offseason, I'm going to let you guys know, I think this offseason is going to be the craziest yet. 100%, this will be the craziest offseason in Overwatch League. Like 10 million %. There is no doubt in my mind this offseason will be by far, and it also, in my opinion, will be arguably potentially one of the worst for players. I think this will be not disastrous by any means. Like, that's not the right word, but it will not be the best season for players this offseason. It is my particular view on it. But we'll just have to see as it develops and as we see. and as we go forward with that. But Roster Mania is just starting. We got so much time to go. Justice as well, the GM said that they have big changes coming, but obviously we expected that. And if they keep Decay, that's going to be a big thing, because I think now at this point they would have had to have decided if they're keeping Decay, or at least let his contract expire for like that interim contract. So that's something that we're going to keep an eye out. We're going to keep a watch on that, because like everyone should be watching that with great interest to see where Decay goes and how Justice performs. It's going to be an interesting one. Well, we've looked at viewership. We've talked about the grand finals. On top of that, Shanghai Dragons, a team I expected to win the Overwatch League after getting knocked out by Dynasty. But a great match too, because we have to talk about this. Dynasty is also going to be holding open trials, which is surprising considering their coach just got Coach of the Year, Moon. In addition to that, they had were the best team in APAC throughout most of the season up until grand finals, and then had a close loss versus Dynasty to get knocked out. It's going to be a crazy season for Shanghai too, because it's tough to see where do you make big changes to this roster, right? After how good this roster is. If you finish top 4 in the Overwatch League, but not just top 4, but had such an incredible regular season run that everyone considered you the favorite, where do you make changes outside of the bench players, right? Because you can make the arguments for like maybe Geggery goes, like players that haven't been playing a lot, maybe Dia. But even Stan 1 showed up in a big way in the grand final, so who was benched throughout most of the season. So, and then I would have said like, okay, Izayaki needs to go, but Izayaki actually came up big in the grand finals. I think he actually had a great series. Like, none of the Dragons played poorly. They just played worse. They just played a lot worse than Dynasty or Shock. Or not a lot worse, but worse. So it's going to be, the roster mania is simply going to be unimaginable, I think, for this offseason. It's going to be nuts to see what's filled. And for what, and also, what are the reasonings for these open trials? Are they actually hoping to find new players? Is it budgetary reasons? With your viewership increasing, it seems unlikely, but I mean, we don't actually know. We don't actually know what the real numbers are, because we're like, okay, China's popping off, but do we actually know that? We don't have the direct numbers, right? Luffy, Dia, Geggery will go. Wait, Luffy's on that roster? Luffy's still on that roster? Wait a minute, I'm gonna have to double check this from chat. Huh? What? Wait a minute. Luffy's on Shanghai still? Oh my God, I didn't even know Luffy was still on that roster. I thought he got dropped with Coma. I thought Coma and Luffy both got dropped. That's crazy. Well, so yeah. That actually, so Luffy maybe. Nasty. It's going to be crazy times. I think there's so many good players out there too that are going to be looking for homes. And it's going to be tough to slot them in. It's sort of reminiscent to me potentially of what's going to be COD League, like where they changed the format and it went to 4v4, so players just have to go. I mean, here at Envy, we have a very, very intimate reminder of the format changing and having to drop good players. So but I don't think it's going to be a format change. I just think there's going to be so many roster slots open and moving about. So it's going to be a tough one. But be on the lookout, because honestly right now we don't actually have too much. We don't really have too much else to go with, because I think really right now it's just a wait and see period. I will say if you're a fan of Shock, you should feel scared, potentially Moth, nervous even, because of the fact that like if this roster makes changes, does that mean any roster is safe? If Shock is not safe from changes, is any roster safe? And is that a greater sign of the league being, in this standby stasis mode for Overwatch 2? Is it something else? Like, what does this mean for the league in general, and what does it mean for rosters? Because if Shock can't be safe after winning 2 grand finals in a row and being very good in both, then what is any roster stability? How can we ever have any stability whatsoever? Outlaws are safe. We never drop washed talent. Outlaws fans showing up to defend their team. Outlaws are an interesting case too, because we've covered a lot of these big teams, but because Dynasty definitely needs to make changes. Shock doesn't. Dragons arguably doesn't, but it looks like they might be, both of those squads. Outlaws definitely needs a lot of retooling. A huge amount of retooling. It's clear that whatever direction they hope to go, the direction of like Flame, I'm going to buy some big name players and bring them in, now my squad's going to be good, did not work out. And the hydration experiment, I think, is actually an okay experiment. It's probably the best part. Hydration and Jexa are probably the two brightest spots of like Outlaws as a roster building, because Hydration shown that he can play flex DPS at like a pretty high level and main tank at a pretty good level. So that's impressive. And Jexa was a pretty overall solid main support the whole season. But the downgrades from Meko and, Repel was kind of a wild card because Repel didn't play a lot necessarily for the Titans last year. Those are kind of question marks. And then the rest of the roster, like, where does Linkster go? Does Linkster stay with the Titans, with the Outlaws? I don't know. I really don't know if Linkster does. Does Blase? Where does Blase's fit? If Blase is, where does Blase's hero pool fit into anything? Just go back to Boston and go play off tank again? Because Boston's probably going to be looking for a new off tank. So Outlaws are definitely going to be on a rebuild. They should be on a rebuild roster solution here. And that's going to be kind of a theme for a lot of teams. Like, so many teams are going to have to change it up. It's really only those top two, Dragons and Shock. And then technically Dynasty won't have to get rid of as much, but I would like them to see them make changes. So they're much more consistent, actually good in the regular season. There's going to be a lot of movement. An absolutely lot of movement. Dante Muma being left out. Dante, of course, I think is still an asset. But who knows if he stays still, because you could have a good player, but they're not necessarily your vision for the future of the roster. Muma, I think at this point, needs to find a new team. It's not that Muma's necessarily bad, but I don't think Muma's kept up. And I also think Muma just needs players need to move homes, because sometimes that's what's best for them and the org. Because maybe a new home is better fit for Muma's playstyle. It's a better fit for the org in general to build around. So I don't think Muma 100% would not stay with the roster. I think it would be a bad idea. But that's sort of the message, is just we're just keeping eyes on rosters and roster mania here. We're in the rebuild phase. Grand finals are done. We've had some promising views on viewership, but some news on viewership, but we don't actually know. But also, I personally am a little down on a lot of the current lack of content for the game. But the balance of, it's not bad. We rebuilt this. Moon was a Boston type of player. Maybe not. Boston's a whole nother question mark. They got a new head coach, Laurie, and we don't know where they're going to go with them either. Because people are like, Laurie's here to save Boston. All Boston fans are like, yes, rejoice. But what if their budget's like $2? How do you build you could build a good team, one budget, but you can't make a championship team by any means. You can't. You simply can't build a championship team on budget. You can make a good team, not championship. In addition to that, you can't keep players on budget. You can't. Valiant, there's no way Valiant doesn't lose at least 3 to 4 members, I feel, this offseason. There's just no way. I find it almost impossible to believe that Valiant won't lose members, because being budget means you don't. And also, it would be a miracle, unless Boston has done some sort of contract skullduggery here. There is no way they're retaining onto the talent they have got unless they have kept them in contract hell. In which case, also, as someone that's also seen some stuff, contracts don't necessarily, and also with their decay situation and other stuff, contracts don't necessarily mean players won't leave. If players raise a big enough stink because they want to be treated better, they'll leave. There's nothing you can do. We're not indentured servitude. You can't force the player to play. So budget does carry some risk, because you can build a good team for less, but you can't necessarily keep them, and you can't win on a budget team. So Laurie being added doesn't necessarily mean that roster is going to necessarily be good, especially also if there's still some lack of control or just the budget problems and the general perception. Why not? You can't. Well, that's sort of been the overview. I mean, I think I've hit all my general topics, sometimes I look over and it seems so empty. Right over here, there could be a Jane. He could be saying something. You don't know what he's saying. I don't listen to him half the time, but he could be saying something. Just pretend. Chat, what would Jane be saying right now, do you think? What do you think he'd be saying? Oh, I'm in Jane's spot. So technically, I can't get over it. There's cables. I can't get over the cables. Can't get over the cables on the chair. And I don't want you to see that I'm wearing shorts with my jacket. Jane, Hoxel's brig is trash. Jane, mod check. He would laugh at you for something you said. That doesn't sound right. He would agree with me with something I've said. Boston still won't try to win. Well, we're not even diverging that much at that point. He would wonder about the Hunters' chances. Hunters is an interesting one, actually, especially with the popularity in China. I know, maybe we would just become the China Overwatch League. We're just like, guys, no point in having the league anywhere else. Just China, Korea. Well, I guess it's time for some mailbag chat. Some mailbag. So we did have some. We sort of left it open-ended for mailbag last week, by the way, chat. We left it was kind of an open door for you to place whatever you want in there. Also, everyone is leaving my... Flame just left one of my chats in Discord, and now everyone's flaming him. Yeah, good. I hate when people leave Discord chats, and it creates a mess. So our mailbag questions from last week were, how should we celebrate Contested in the rap party? What do you want to see in Contested Season 2? Also, thanks for tuning in and answering mailbag. And once again, thank you. So I'm going to start with the nice ones first. Steakman says, thank you, Avast and Jane, for making this season... Now, Jane's not here, but I'll pass it on to him. For making this season so extremely enjoyable with your content. Some silly custom workshop modes would be fun. Also, make Jane enjoy a nice, refreshing pissy shitty. Jane actually hasn't had a pissy shitty. We should definitely give him one. We should have a pissy shitty eating segment. Write that down. Write that down. Write that down. Who is Avast? Says Solomon. No gruel for you this month. You won't be eating. Also, another not nice one. Tim Week says, remove Avast and Jane from Contested, herd Super into an empty studio, and don't give him a script. Only release him after he guessed all the topics for the day and talked about them. If you're having trouble with learning Super in the studio, try Peanuts. A pissy shitty off. Who can eat it the fastest? So far, we've had one good comment. We've had two very mediocre comments about the reflections of what we'd like to add to Contested. So, extremely mediocre results so far. Let's do this. You should reflect and look back on all the good times you two have brought to the community around you because we love you both. Good one. That's from LZI. Perhaps we have a highlights moment, a collection that we post of all the contested highlights. That could be good. This is the type of stuff that we want. That's the type of stuff that we want, chat. Okay? We're over here. We're dancing for your enjoyment. You're throwing coins at us. When you berate us. Contested going full Korean. Going full Korean to win. We replaced Jade and I with a Korean broadcast duo. We need to win. We need to win some games. We need to win some games here. Replace us. Also, we still have Av and Jath in Korea. We never got them back. Technically, we sort of left them there. We've left the interns. So maybe we'll get them back at some point. They're still in there. So I don't know what they're doing, honestly. They have no support. They have no funds. What is... I'm looking... Okay, I'd like to see Jath and Av become free agents and try to get on a team for next season. They could do tryouts. We could send them to tryouts. That's a fun one. What if Avast and Jane did the Gangnam Style for 10 hours? From Butters is GM. Yeah, we'll keep a lookout for that. Someone saying, suck my expletive, Avast. More companion streams with Jane in the studio. Okay. We had an insult followed by a suggestion. Insult followed by a suggestion. Very good. Very good. And we also had some more comments that were sent to us on like YouTube chat, Reddit. So I'm going to start with Homebound 11 because Homebound 11's been posting threads. I've seen you out there, Homebound 11. You've been hustling. Okay? And I'm here to celebrate you. I'm going to give a kiss a homie. Homebound 11 says, if one episode per week, have your episode be on Tuesday so you aren't pushed out by Off the Break. We aren't ever pushed out by Off the Break, though. We're pushed out by Rocket League, Homebound. Rocket League beats us up on the regular, and they take our lunch money. Off the Break is simple. Lando, he's good to work with. The Rocket League guys, though, they're a bunch of hooligans. They're a bunch of absolute hooligans that steal my studio space. So we're going to have to deal with them at some point. Maybe have like an anchorman, like news anchor fight where they all are like gathered in the parking lot. For two episodes per week on Tuesday, roster recap and guest interviews. See, guest interviews, we had a lot more planned. We had a good one in Numlocked, but then COVID hit. And then the problem is that because we never had anyone in a central location again, it was so hard to get people. Numlocked was like a really lucky guess. It was so hard to get people to do interviews when you're not in a central location. We got really lucky with like Numlocked and Wheats and things like that. On Thursday, we are contesting the contested debate show. Our topic this week, the league needs to scrap contenders. Okay, so a debate show, essentially. That could be a fun one. But I mean, that sort of sits in like the pre-show, but like it's good ideas. Those are good ideas. I see where you're going for home at 11. People wanted to bring Av and Jaff back. We couldn't do that. Not for the wrap up. They're still in Korea. Gio from YouTube says, love the show. Thanks for the laughs and insight. Any more content you guys will be thoroughly enjoyed. Where's that? Where's that, chat? Huh? Where's that? Where's my support? From like Gio. Paid comment? No. Not paid comment at all. Not paid comment at all. Not a fake comment. That's the truth. Honestly, today hasn't gone that slow. We thought today was going to be really fast. But luckily, because I'm filled with hot air, I could go for a really long time. So we've actually almost hit 45 minutes even without Jane. We don't even need him anymore. I'm going to play. What we're going to do is we're going to put a balloon. Can we get the wide shot? Can we get a balloon here? And we're going to draw a beard on the bottom of it. Because the top part will be like Jane's head. It'll just be shiny and like that. And we're going to draw a beard on it. And I'm just going to put that right there. And that's going to be a replacement for Jane. So... And then we'll have contestant ready to go whenever. We don't need him. It's perfect. It's perfect. So yeah, I guess sort of as a closing statement, I guess, because we sort of reached a natural conclusion. We have to give a did we give a discussion of what we wanted to choose actually for the final mailbag? Did we have one?
I would say it's more so like, what you enjoyed the most about the show, with it being a new venture, a new thing for us to try.
Just more suggestions?
Yeah, just like what you would like to see going into next year. Maybe desires for off-season
This is
stuff.
Mike talking, by the way, chat. This is the voice that you hear.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm coming up for air. But it's, that's really kind of all we're looking for. Feedback is always great. It's going to influence a lot of choices we make for next year.
Because we've already started taking the suggestions from last mailbag, and we've been looking at them. And because we have plans for off-season content, like we said, we're going to be on a break for about 2 weeks. And then we're coming back, and it might not be always traditional contested, but it'll be spin-off stuff, and it'll be all sorts of different type of content. Sometimes it might be contested in the off season, it might not. We haven't really decided in all of the suggestions you guys give us, because this is the first year, and we've had a lot of challenges too, because we had to go work from home for a little bit. We couldn't be in the studio. Then we came back to the studio, but reduced space. Then Rocket League started coming in, so we've been sharing our studio space. So it has been a lot of moving around, moving pieces, and so we're just trying to nail down the format that we want, and especially in the off season, what's going to be happening when there's a lot less Overwatch League related content and how we want to format that stuff. Mike to bring Av and Jav from Korea. Mike is going to personally go to Korea and bring them back.
It sounds like a lot of work.
That's your job, Mike.
Oh no!
Everyone should hire Solomon. Solomon is a very talented person. Solomon's worth $2 kajillion if possible. Hire me too. Also hire Oddly Awkward. I'm not the hiring manager, but I will say hire Oddly Awkward. Hire Mel. Hire Solomon. Hire them all. Everyone in chat, you're hired. I can't pay you any money, but you're hired. So there you go. You all have a job. You all have a job now, but I can't give you any money. So good work, everybody. Good work. You did it up. But yeah, so if you want to give us any more suggestions about what you want to see from us in the off season, or even just next season, for in the future and beyond, for contested for Jane and myself and the studio space and what we want to do. Feel free to drop them in my Discord and the Contested Mailbag channel. We generally make a Reddit thread. There's also the Contested Mailbag subreddit. There's the YouTube comment section in Envytv when the video goes live. And there is technically the review section of the podcast, which no one has used yet still. No one has used the review section of the podcast, but that's fine. That's fair. If we do it, maybe it'll be a nice surprise one day when I show up to Spotify and it's there. Can you sign off on my volunteer hours? Technically, if you were an intern or a volunteer here, I could. But otherwise, I'm committing fraud. Volunteer fraud. That's the worst type of fraud because you get karma. You get karmic justice if you do volunteer fraud. That's almost as bad. It's almost as bad. Except the difference is for Overwatch League and other professional esport ventures, the whole goal is to make money, not to be good. Not to be nice to people. It's not supposed to be a moral imperative. It's only fraud if you're caught. True. That's fair. So first feedback, commit fraud, but do it well. That's our first feedback for contested from the chat. Commit fraud, but do it well.
But if you don't get caught, did you really commit fraud?
We committed it.
But the crime hasn't been assigned. Therefore, did you commit the crime?
It's nebulous fraud. It's dark matter fraud. We can't identify it, but it's there. It's 100% there. I can lie. We just won't tell the authorities. But yeah, that's what we want to see is all of your suggestions because we've had a great season. It's been a rocky season, like I said, but we really love doing all this. We're hoping we can pick up skits and do more fun stuff like that. Like, we had so many plans and it just got interrupted by COVID all the way. But the ones we did get to do, we think we did really well. Jane obviously isn't here to say how much fun he had, but we had a great time working together. We're hoping to continue to have a good time working together in the future with Jane, with Mike, with everyone from Envy. So just give us all your suggestions. We're going to read them because we always want to do things that people are going to like and will make the show better and will make just general content better, just outside of Contested 2 for us and what we're going to make. So it's going to be a really interesting off season after our break and interesting next year. But overall, I don't... Contested X Bad Patchy Mario League. Oh, that's right. Also, someone wanted to do a crossover with Plat Chat, but that could be fun. But I don't know if we're ever really able to get it done because of various sponsor stuff too. I'm not sure if we'd ever be able to do that. Honestly, it would be fun to see if we could somehow work it out.
I mean, if they're down, I'd like to.
Yeah, think so.
I think so. It's honestly up to them though.
Up to them.
Yeah.
You don't think it would be like any sort of problems with obligations?
I don't know. Like, is it because of like
well, they have T-Mobile.
Yeah, but we don't have a mobile.
I guess we don't have a mobile. Yeah.
We have other ones, but
True.
We don't have a mobile one yet.
T-Mobile versus Frontier grudge match. Well, I guess they're not the same. It's just a phone versus internet,
Yeah, one's an internet and
cable, I guess.
Yeah, the other one's a cell phone provider. It's completely different.
So it is different markets. Yeah, so it's actually not the end of the world. So that is technically possible. BPL has no sponsors. It's easy. have the BPL. Yeah, we could do a crossover. What would be our BPL crossover? There's Bad Patchy Mario League. Well, I have to still give out my Killer Bean plush to the Bad Patchy Mario League MVP. It's still waiting for it to arrive from Makeshift. So we're still waiting for that. With all 6 people between Plat Chat and Contest, you might be able to remember the entire Guangzhou Charge roster. Oh, man. Well, that has been a great season of Contested, Mike, I think. We've had a great time here. Jane's not here, but he would say it would be a great season if he was here.
We could ring the bell in his honor.
Could ring the bell in his honor? Is the bell here? Where is it? Is it beneath me?
It's on the other side of the box.
It's on the other side of the box? Ah, it is. We ring the, oh my, that was right in my, how does he do it? That's right in your ears. I'm deaf. I'm deaf in one side. I don't know how he does that. Jane must have no hearing. His beard hair must muffle his eardrums or something. This is why my smooth baby face can't muffle the sound waves because I can't do it. But that has been the first season of Contested done. So be on the lookout for what we're going to be doing next in the coming weeks. 2 weeks from now, we'll be done with our breaks. We'll be ready to hopefully do some more stuff very soon. We'll take a look at your feedback below if you want to do it in the Envytv YouTube comment section, in my Discord, and the Reddit r/contested mailbag. We're going to be looking at all of that. We really appreciate everyone tuning in for the first year through all the ups and downs and the work from home and the not work from home and the COVID ruining all the logistics and blah, blah, blah. But we're going to have really big plans, hopefully, and evolving our content, doing more in the future. And we will see you guys very soon after our break, hopefully, to do all sorts of fun new stuff besides just Contested only. And we can expand and do what we'd like. But thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching a whole year from us. And Jay's not here to say it, but also from him. And we will see you guys hopefully very soon on the next one after the break. Bye-bye.